وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We were talking in the khutbah today about the importance of giving da'wah. So we talked about this beautiful ayah in Surah Al-Nahl. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ادعو إلى سبيل ربك. Invite people to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the way of your Lord. بالحكمة, with wisdom. والموعظة الحسنة, translated as with good instructions. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and debate with them in a way that is best, أحسن. إِنَّ رَبَّكَ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ, indeed your Lord is the most knowing. بِمَنْ ضَلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِهِ, those who have strayed away from the path of Allah. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ, and those who will be rightly guided. So when it comes to da'wah, there are certain priorities, and that's what this ayah is trying to remind us. That first of all, when we call people towards the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it needs to be exactly that. It should not be for any organization, for any other agendas, but it is to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now organizations facilitate that process for people, but sometimes we are guilty where it becomes more about the organization than the da'wah itself. Right? So it really should be about calling people towards Allah. But if we're not organized, we're also not going to make a lot of progress, right? So it needs to work hand in hand. And it is to be the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not whatever we think is Islam, right? So first you have to be knowledgeable of the basics of Islam and what you're calling towards. And also earlier we mentioned, which is an ayah I, to be honest, really need to study with our shuyukh, because there's a beautiful teaching here. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, that who could be better in speech than the one who calls other people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the word here used is invitation, right? So it's easy to say that everybody out there is a disbeliever and we should just hate disbelievers, but then also say that we care for them to learn about Islam. Because if we have hate towards people because they are kuffar, they are disbelievers, then in that sense, all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were disbelievers, right? And if the Prophet ﷺ didn't have care for them to be guided, and he's making dua for Omar radiallahu anhu, he's making dua for Abu Jahl, and we know what turned out, right? Abu Jahl never accepted Islam, but Omar radiallahu anhu became the legend that he is. But the Prophet ﷺ had a foresightedness to understand that who are my worst enemies, could potentially become the best allies of Islam. And subhanAllah, a brother today gave me a very hard time when I said that we should have that care and love for people if we're trying to invite them, right? Because you're not going to invite someone to your house and just have hate for them, right? Who invites people to something that you're excited about when you hate that person? So he literally told me that if your next door neighbor is a disbeliever, then you need to hate your neighbor. And I said, that doesn't go. Sorry, brother. So let me talk to Sheikh Abdullah, but that just goes against my fitrah. I'm not gonna say anything. So inshallah, just to put it out there, because subhanallah, we want to give da'wah, but then there are certain ideologies that we have with which we have this concept of Islam, and then we go out there and we're trying to invite people, but we don't know where to draw the line, right, between hate. So the way I've been taught is you hate the action of disbelief, but you don't hate the person himself, right? Yes.
The same question. Sorry.
Yes.
So did Prophet ﷺ
Hate people in that sense?
Neighbor
Right.
You gave an example of the Jewish kid,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Exactly. Actually, on my way here, I was thinking about his uncle. We know how much Prophet loved his uncle. So if you're going to go with that thought process, then he was hating his uncle, but he loved him at the same time. He wanted Islam for his uncle so bad that he's saying, oh my uncle, just say La ilaha illallah at his deathbed, and you can see the pain in his voice. That doesn't come out of hatred, and at the same time I care for this person, right? So it's something I just really felt like it was a struggle for me to really understand this concept, and I feel like it's open for questioning. We can talk to Sheikh Abdullah, but to me, when we have learned this stuff as years, it's always been about hating the action of the disbelief, but not the person himself. Because you can't call an invite, right? Allah uses the word invite them to Islam. He could have said force them into Islam, right? Or have hate for them and then convert them into Islam. But it's that if we went that route, then people would see that in the message of Islam, and Islam wouldn't sound very genuine in that case. So then Allah says to do it with hikmah, which means use your rationale, right? So Islam does have a lot of room for logic, but it also connects with the emotional part of other people. So that's why Allah says وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ, to invite them with good instructions, with emotional attachment, where this person feels that you care for them. So even in that aspect, you can tell that Allah wants us to use logic, which is hikmah, but He also wants us to connect with that person at a heart level, right? Like they should really feel that you genuinely care for them, and that whatever you're proposing would actually benefit this person. And that's maw'idat al-hasana. Now, after you have explained the most important part of Islam, Tawheed, and they have some questions, which all of us even have questions ourselves, right? Our youth have many questions. When it's not answered, it creates doubts in their hearts. So at that point, you might have to debate. But debate is not the default, right? Like we think, like we watched all these YouTube videos with High Park, they call it, at UK especially, right? And it's just like, it starts off with like two people debating and who can win the conversation, and then we're like rating the debates. Oh yeah, the Muslim brother won, right? But dawah was never about winning debates. It was about getting the message. And if the other person genuinely thinks like you're out there to get them, they're gonna get defensive, right? They're not gonna really connect with you. And actually, how many of these debates actually resulted in someone saying, man, you were right. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. I accept Islam. Like, when was the last time you saw that happen, right? And so, but Allah does leave room for debate. He says, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And if needed, debate with them. But even then, how do you debate? With ihsan. Don't lose your cool. You can't start cussing. You can't, have your ego come into it. And you might have to walk away. Walking away is also necessary in certain situations, because Allah says, إِنَّ رَبَّكَ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ ضَلَّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ. Allah knows that these people who are going to stray away from Allah's path, Allah already knows about that. You did your part, but if they get vile and they start, saying things that are going to impact you in your iman, then you need to walk away. And we know from other ayat that you say, قَالُوا سَلَامًا, right? You say peace. This is good enough. I did my part. وَهُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِالْمُهْتَدِينَ. And Allah knows who will be guided. So subhanAllah, as I was thinking about talking about this, I got a call from, and this is always a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I got a call from this convert that we talked to and invited him to one of the classes in Dallas about a year ago. And he never contacted me back from then on. Texted him a few times. And subhanAllah, just before coming here, he calls me up and he says, I've been going through some real tough times, but I am still a Muslim. I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Had some rough times in my life, and I lost my phone, and that's why I couldn't call you. So I've been, for the last year, searching for my old phone, and I found it today. And I literally was looking for your number like for the last year, and I found it. So just wanted to call you and say salams. And subhanAllah, like how Allah guides people. And this guy lives in Kansas. There's no Muslims around, but somehow Allah kept his faith preserved by himself. Like he just watches the news, keeps it, does whatever he's been taught. No Muslims around him, but he's still a Muslim, subhanAllah. So we should never give up on people, and we should genuinely care for them when we're giving dawah. Subhanakallah bihamdik, nashhadu an la